Okay. Good evening, everybody. We are calling to order this special board meeting of the Truckee Public Utility District. I think it's special just because it's on a different date. So anyhow, call to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Sure. Director Morrell? Here. Director Randall?
Here.
Director Bender?
Here.
Vice President La Liotis?
Here.
President Finn?
Here. And the Pledge of Allegiance is next. Tony, would you mind leading us in the pledge, please?
Ready, begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Fantastic. And since we have a very juicy meeting ahead of us and a snowstorm coming in, I'm going to try and keep us on point this evening and roll right along. Brian, do we have any changes to the agenda tonight?
There are no changes this evening.
Awesome. Public comment, number 5. This is time set aside for the public to address the board on any matter that is not on the agenda. Testimony related to an agendized matter should be addressed at that time that the item is being considered. Do we have any public comment tonight? On the internets or otherwise? Oh my goodness. Seeing none. Director update. This is time for directors to comment on any item within the purview of the district, again, that is not on the agenda. Do we have any directors' comments this evening? I automatically turn left, but...
And that's okay.
Okay. Director Morrell.
I have a comment. I just want to say thank you for using Civic Plus for the board materials. It's really great. I'm used to using that in Tahoe Donner, so it was an easy transition for me, but I really like it. So that's a good move for the district.
Thank you. Director Laliotis?
Nothing much, just thank you to the crews. I see them out there working with this nice spring weather we've had, which hasn't stuck around, obviously, but they're doing, I see them doing pole replacements and doing things out there, so taking advantage of the good weather. So I want to thank staff for all their hard work, and I guess we're going to go back to shoveling snow here for a while.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you, Director Laliotis. And to the right.
Nothing from me.
Thank you.
Here we are.
Bender?
Appreciate you
Randall, Director Bender.
taking the helm and running us through the meeting tonight. So thank you.
My pleasure. We shall see. I also was going to, like Director Morrell, I am enjoying our new platform. I think it's going to be super useful and helpful to me as we move forward. And that's it for me, because I'm going to keep it on point. We have a large consent calendar. Just for the public's information, we do get a substantial amount of information attached to our agenda about all the items on consent. So it is not like we are just saying yes. We had lots of opportunity to read up on all of these items and ask our own questions before the meeting. Brian, did you have something to say?
No.
Okay, so anyhow, is there any public comment on the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none. Directors, does anybody have comments, questions, or items they need to pull?
Nope.
Okay, wow. We are keeping this meeting rolling.
We did skip director our department updates.
Oh, our department updates, that's what
And I think
Martina was trying to tell
Brian wants to
me.
do a public hearing too.
What? Okay.
Am I on the right agenda? I am using the new software.
It might be one of those nights. I apologize. I did this last time too. I think I skipped right over department, which is my favorite part. So there's a block going on, but we're
I don't have
backpacking.
a lot for updates, in kind of recognizing that we have a pretty beefy agenda and a lot for consideration and deliberation by the board. I did want to make a couple of comments, one as an update and then one as a kind of a blanket statement on the consent calendar. So first, with general department updates, I did want to say, we had some updates included in the staff report in the board packet, so please take the opportunity to review those, and definitely happy to answer any questions about those throughout the week and the weeks to come. I did want to, from a kind of a general manager update, I had the unique opportunity to attend a high-performing leadership course at UC Berkeley last week. While I wanted to thank the board for your own reasons and accommodations for being flexible and rescheduling the board this week, that being done allowed me the opportunity also to attend this course at Berkeley. I look forward to bringing some of the things gained from that to the board and to staff. A really enlightening and high-performing group there with some of our other leaders in our community joined as well. And so it was a collaborative effort in Truckee. And it was a unique experience to attend this course with 35 other individuals from 19 different countries. And so it really put a diverse spin and perspective on leadership I'm looking forward to implement and bring to the board. I also have another update that's exciting for us. It's going to be addressed a little bit later on in one of the items for action this evening. We spoke several weeks back about the need and desire to separate out some of the core responsibilities and roles for our electric utility director position. And it was really driven by the fact that we had an ever-increasing demand and need for bandwidth, focus, and strategy on our energy procurement strategies, our California regulatory compliance strategies, and a lot of our other kind of transmission and distribution strategies moving forward. That being said, continuing demand and growth in the areas of wildfire mitigation, line clearances, line infrastructure replacements, substation replacements, and a lot of strategy there too. So we separated that position out into two roles, and I wanted to introduce Mr. Mike Swanson, who has joined us. I wanted to give a little bit of his resume just for introductions to the community and the board. Mike Swanson has built a distinguished career in the electric utility industry, beginning as a line crew member and earning his journeyman lineman certification way back in 1988. Over the years, he has taken on increasing levels of responsibility, serving as a supervisor, superintendent, manager, and director overseeing line construction crews, troubleman, control centers, power line technology, and engineering at PG&E. Before retiring with PG&E, he was also tasked with directing their wildfire system hardening programs, leading critical infrastructure improvements and enhanced grid resilience. He's also served as the operations section chief for their public safety power shutoff programs and as a key role in their emergency response programs. And so in 2020, he brought his expertise to Hawaii Electric, helping rebuild their systems and staff there, and also returned to the mainland last year to work for a nationwide contractor, serving as the vice president of operations and safety before joining our district here. So Mike brings a lot of experience in strategic thinking and leadership to operations and engineering. We're happy to have him on board. And so thank you, Mike, for joining us.
Welcome.
Yes.
And welcome to the mountains.
Exactly.
It's different than the beach.
In terms of the consent calendar, I wanted to add one kind of blanket, not pull any items, but add a blanket detail. I was approached on asking for some clarification on a couple of the procurements in there are for consulting services, and our staff reports might have been a little bit more detailed in terms of our provisions and decision-making processes as to whether or not we go out to RFP, public advertisement on some of our key consulting services contracts. And so district code has provisions in it for public procurement where staff and the general manager can make a determination whether it has benefit to the district and the community or ratepayers to go out to public procurements and request RFPs. If the consulting services, professional services there isn't a perceived benefit or we make a determination there isn't a benefit to go out to public RFP requests, we can recommend for approval to the board those contracted services. Examples of those are our HDR consultants with our cost of service analysis. Sean Korn, HDR, have a lot of experience in the Truckee-Tahoe Basin with our rate structures and our operating costs and has a long history of working with our public partners and the district on rate studies, cost of service studies. And so we typically have used Sean also just because of his familiarity. There's a lot of cost savings in using Sean Korn and HDR and his team for some of those studies. Other examples would be there's a couple of procurement authorizations where a joint powers procurements is implemented. And so staff has in district code the option to use joint procurement processes. And what that means is we can use either joint procurement clearinghouses like Sourcewell or some other state procurement agency, or some of our joint partners, Northern California Power Agency, UAMPS, Aqua, CMUA, where they've already gone through the public procurement process and have awarded, deemed either a low bidder or most beneficial bidder. And so we can piggyback on those public procurement processes using their same vendors and contractors. And so we'll commit to giving more clarification and detail on that. There's some reference to district code in the staff reports, but we'll be a little more detailed so that the public understands we're not bypassing a public procurement process. We're utilizing someone else's that's already been done. So it saves the district money, it saves staff time, and we're still getting the same benefit. The community is also getting the same benefit for the opportunity to bid on those. I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, though. More information is better for people who look at a giant consent calendar and go, gosh, they're really just rubber stamping everything. We're not. We have lots of information, have had lots of opportunity to talk with staff about the things that are on the consent calendar to our satisfaction. Is that all for the updates okay. I apologize to my executive leadership team, whose updates I very much value. And again, welcome, Mr. Swanson. I look forward to your contributions. We're happy to have you here. Okay, consent calendar. Any public comment on the consent calendar? Seeing none. Directors, any comments, questions, items to be pulled from the consent calendar? None. Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll move the consent calendar tonight.
I'll second.
Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Morrell?
Yes.
Director Randall?
Yes.
Director Bender?
Yes.
Vice President Laliotis?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes. Wow, that was amazing. Okay. We're all the way to our action items this evening. We are banging it out. Item number 20, consideration for approval of the updated Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, between the Truckee-Donner Public Utility District and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 1245. I believe we are going to receive some information and move forward.
All right, thank you, President Finn, members of the board. As President Finn mentioned, this is action item 20. I'll be your presenter this evening on a couple of items for updates to the MOU and District Code personnel, District Code Title IV personnel. Both items are related to revisions and adjustments to staff compensation and benefits plans for fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 26-27, the next budget cycle. So in general, the district's employees have two classifications. They're the non-exempt employees. These employees are typically the staff that are assigned to operations, maintenance, and administration. These are, generally speaking, field level operations and customer service administrative services. These are employees that typically work on a per hour basis and are under the provisions of California Labor Code as it relates to hourly employees, overtime, et cetera. And then we have exempt employees that are typically the district's management, engineering, and technical services. These are, while they're assigned hourly wage, they're typically salary-based employees that are exempt to some of the hourly provisions under the California Labor Code. Their positions typically are more related and associated with management, leadership, or specific professional services. And so this item this evening, this first item, is specifically related and associated with the non-exempt employees that are represented here at the district by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Union, Local 1245. As I point out in the slide here, I think it's an important and good historical note about the relationships that have been fostered for many, many decades between the district and IBEW. The district and IBEW have maintained a labor MOU since 1967. That's quite a run there. And so as it points out at the bottom of the slide here, the last MOU was updated, negotiated in 2019, became effective in 2020, and expired December 31st of last year. So the last MOU was a 5-year contract from 2020 to 2024. Historically, the district and IBEW have maintained MOUs that have typically been in that 3 to 5 year window. We've had a few that were single years and 2 years going a little bit further back in history, but over the last 10, 15 years, they've typically been in that 3 to 5 year window. And the goal for these negotiations are to update the terms of the MOU and to establish fair, competitive compensation and benefits packages. One, for that very reason, to make sure that we're fairly compensating our employees, but also maintain the district's ability to recruit and retain qualified employees. And so in preparation for the negotiations near the end of the existing MOUs, staff begins the process with board approval to begin the negotiation process. To kind of as a precursor in preparation, typically we would conduct a form of a compensation study or a comp and class study in preparation for that work. And what that really helps the district with is to understand in more detail what similar utilities, similar organizations are compensating their staffs, kind of in a hope to do an apples to apples comparison at different classifications. Also look at what compensation and benefits packages look like kind of in their totality, the total packages, and look for any trends that we see in our competitive markets. We tend to focus more on Northern California, perhaps Northern and Central California, public utility space. If to the extent we can, we try to find and identify other organizations that are both water and power similar to ours. It's a very difficult endeavor because the district is unique. We are a special district, and I'm going to emphasize special. And what I mean by that is there are very few organizations in California that are both a water and electric utility special district, particularly the same size and scope as the Truckee Downer PUD. And then there's also the unique kind of environment we live in, both geographically and economically. So those studies are typically very challenging to find apples to apples comparisons. And so we do both an internal study and a consulted study through a third party professional service. A little bit of timeline. Back in October, at the October 2nd meeting, the board appointed the general manager, myself, as the district's labor negotiator. And then staff and IBEW representatives began the negotiations process later that month in October of 2024. The negotiation team typically consists of myself representing the district and a business representative representing IBEW, and then a negotiating team to offer additional expertise or perspectives on things. Typically that is management staff in the district and shop stewards or union representatives in the IBEW staff. After a very productive negotiation process, the district's negotiating team and IBEW's negotiating team arrived at what we refer to as a tentative agreement to the proposed modifications of the MOU, with the intent of making those modifications and provisions effective retroactively to January 1st, 2025 through December 31st of 2027. I can say that IBEW's membership ratified the MOU as proposed under the tentative agreement, meaning they brought it before their membership for vote and consideration. They ratified it pending board review and approval that we're taking on tonight. The staff report has a lot more detail, and happy to answer any questions. For tonight's presentation, we've identified some kind of high-level summary material changes. Really, these are more financial, having fiscal impact or more significant financial modifications. So for fiscal year 2025, the wage adjustments included a general wage increase of 5.5% for all represented employees. It also included a 22.5% market adjustment for the lineman and electrician classifications. And I wanted to touch on this real quick. The 5.5 is included in that 22.5%, so it's not a combination of both for those classifications. So at the end of the day, the lineman classification, electrician classification will receive a 22.5% market adjustment for 2025. The rest of the represented staff would receive a 5.5 general wage increase. The reason for the kind of the distinction between the two is that during our market studies that conducted by the district, our consultants, as well as IBEW, there was a clear indication that there had developed over the last 5 years time period of the previous MOU, a significant separation between the district's lineman wages and the competitive market, particularly out there in Northern California. And so we did some comp studies with our public agency partners throughout Northern California and some of the investor-owned utilities that could be construed as competitive markets for the district's lineman and electrician classifications. And it was clearly illustrated that a market adjustment was necessary. And I think just kind of anecdotally, what likely occurred was over the course of the 5-year MOU that we had between 2020 and 2024, we had a COVID event that created a lot of market fluctuations, job market fluctuations. We also had several Northern California fires that some of the other utilities were responding to replace infrastructure, and so it put some higher demands on these market classifications. And so we saw pretty significant adjustments in other MOUs throughout Northern California and Southern California, but particularly Northern California for the lineman classification. So the market adjustment is appropriate. Staff is proposing through the tentative agreements that these percentage marks here. And then for fiscal year 26 and 27, it would be a blanket general wage increase for the entire represented group of 4% for each year respectively. I wanted to give a little bit of context for kind of comparing what we're proposing this evening to the last 5 years. We had some historical wage adjustments off here to the upper left. This was the past MOU. It was the structure for determining those annual cost of living or general wage increases were predicated on a market index. And so we had agreed at that time to the Consumer Price Index W, wages, wage earners. And so you can see just to the right there, in 2020, there was an agreement for a 5% general wage increase, and then you see a 2%, 5%, 5%, and 2% for the subsequent years. That is illustrated kind of more in context and perspective to the lower right. You'll see a graphic that compares to the far right the average total rate of pay increases for all MOU positions of 3.8% over that 5-year period compared to some of the other market indicators. And so CPIW was at 3.4 at the end of this. The reason why the little bit of disparity between 3.4 and 3.8 is that original 5% wasn't based on CPIW. It was a general wage increase. But then you can see some of the other indicators, the National Consumer Price Index and kind of the Pacific region there in the middle, just to give a little context of where our wages have compared to inflation. Some additional changes for the proposed revised MOU. The district would add 2 additional recognized holidays, increase from 11 in the previous MOU to 13. We did, during our surveys of other agencies, it's kind of all over the map, but the general prevailing trend is that public agencies tend to have 13 to 14 holidays recognized. The union representatives and staff negotiating team came to an agreement with 2 additional holidays. left the selection and recommendation from IBEW was Martin Luther King and Juneteenth. And so staff is in alignment with that, proposing those as the adjustments. There's also a revision to the longevity pay. Previously, this was in district code as a flat rate, a flat incentive, and it wasn't based on any metrics. It was just a progressive flat incentive paid and dispersed at the beginning of each year through negotiation process to kind of put some more impact and kind of efficacy on the incentive. The proposal is to make the incentive a percentage base of base salary. We did some research and surveys out there with other public utilities who have a similar structure, and it really kind of the feedback was that it provides a little bit more incentive as a longevity and recruitment tool, as opposed to a flat rate that could be, in all honesty, not really much of an incentive. The other additional change was the revision of vacation accrual rate. This doesn't have a significant impact on the workforce because the adjustments were specifically for our employees that are in that 25-year plus. During our kind of compensation and benefits analysis, we saw the other agencies had a little bit more of an incentive and accrual of vacation time for the longer tenured employees. So we made some proposed adjustments to that vacation accrual rate. And then finally, these are more kind of ancillary operational changes that don't have a tremendous impact financially on the district's bottom line, but do have some incentives for staff and recognizing their hard work in some of our emergency response and overtime. So the proposed changes include an increase in standby pay. This is really directed towards our staff that we ask to leave their home and stay in Truckee or leave their home and stay out in the field on call for prolonged periods of time. There was a lot of discussion and recognition that this is one of the core functions and benefits of having a highly skilled field staff for both water and power, ensuring that we continue to be able to recruit staff that want to respond to these after-hour emergencies and provide the services to our customer base 24/7. And then we did some modest reclassifications or proposed reclassifications of the customer service representative positions. Previously, the district had a customer service 1, 2, and 3. There was a lot of discussion about the utility of those incremental levels and coming back and reclassifying, reevaluating some of those job descriptions so that those positions have an opportunity for more professional development and add additional value to our organization. This is also coupled with the fact that we're increasing our technologies with automated notification systems, call centers, online smart hub. A lot of these things are technologies that tend to reduce the customer engagement in person, and so finding additional value and utility for some of our administrative services and customer service staff is going to be important strategy moving forward. And then the board approved this in previous months at the beginning of 2024, but it's getting added into the MOU. I just kind of want to remind the board and staff, the community, this is something that the board was very supportive of back at the beginning of the year, adding a wellness benefit to ensure that our staff have an opportunity to, manage that work-life balance, that wellness component of what a healthy and prepared staff is a high-performing staff. And so we created a benefits program to incentivize wellness activities, and that could be a range of things depending on personalities and preferences, anything from ski passes, gym memberships, yoga memberships, whatever those wellness, mind, body, and spirit that someone has interested in, having a well-rested, prepared, and healthy staff is important. And then a vision adjustment because it hadn't been adjusted for inflation in many, many years. And staff feedback was, and we've all kind of experienced this, vision care glasses have gone up quite a bit in cost since, 15, 20 years ago. This is a financial breakdown. I'm not going to get into every detail. Happy to answer any questions, but it's really kind of a breakdown of the variances to the fiscal year '25 budget. So when we do budgets in our 2-year cycles, when we have an expiring MOU or we don't have, haven't completed yet some of the benefits packages revisions during the budget cycle, we make some assumptions and estimations. And then we make those adjustments once that data comes in. So for 2025, there'll definitely be some adjustments. And then in 26, 27, staff will bring these revisions to the MOU and District Code Title IV into the budget process later this summer. So at the kind of bottom line it's an overall rate of pay changes for both union and unrepresented employees. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but this same chart is going to show up on both these presentation items. We're looking at just over $1 million a year in wages increases for the entire staff, which translates to an additional operating expense of about 1.8% to rates. That's combined electric and water. So if we took the entire MOU package, the financial package, and the unrepresented financial package, that's what we're looking at. So fiscal impact, to overgeneralize here, the operating reserve balances are sufficiently above policy targets, board policy targets, and the financial master plan budgets to fund the variances to fiscal year '25 budget. There's currently a $10.4 million reserve balance for electric and $7 million for water. As I mentioned earlier, the approved changes, if approved, would be incorporated into the 26-27 budget cycle as we go into the workshops later this summer. And the related cost of service analysis for the rate study that HDR will conduct for us later this spring and early summer. With that, the recommendation this evening is to approve the updated memorandum of understanding between the Truckee-Downer Public Utility District and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local 1245 to be effective January 1st, 2025 through December 31st of 2027 in substantially the form presented. And this last kind of phrase at the end of that sentence is, if there are non-substantial adjustments and edits based from the form or copy of the MOU that was put in the attachment, we will go back and forth a little bit with IBW to make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted and that we're on the same page. During kind of the transition of documents, there might have been some minor errors there. If anything substantial is revealed, we would bring it back to the board for further consideration. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for that review and update and presentation of the hopefully final form. Do we have any public comment on this item this evening? It appears not. Do we have any questions or comments or discussion that the board would like to indulge in?
I want to say,
right now.
oh yeah,
Just-
congratulations. A lot of work, time, and effort went into this, so it's nice to have an agreed MOU with the union. So really always like to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to take partial credit for that. The other part of the credit is the IBW team was also very professional and productive to work with.
Awesome.
Thank you, thank you. Director Randall?
Yes, I'll reiterate, thank you for the hard work. Appreciate that. What is the wellness benefit?
So
I
in the,
understand what it is. What's the
oh, do you want the dollar value? Sorry. Thank you for saving me and going into a lot of detail on it. It's $500 a year, up to $500. It's a reimbursement. It's not a advanced upfront. Staff is able to submit for a reimbursement on qualified expenses that we can associate with the wellness benefit for up to $500 a year.
Okay, and has the district looked into developing any sort of partnerships with wellness providers like Park and Rec has had an agreement with the hospital so their people can use it at a discounted rate so they get more bang for the buck?
That's an absolutely fantastic recommendation. We did some initial surveys, and I think the answer is we haven't worked with Rec and Park. We are working with other organizations like TINS, the Tahoe Institute of Natural Sciences, working on hiking opportunities for staff and families to get out in nature as a benefit. I think the Rec and Park proposal would be a great one to consider.
Well, or even a ski area, if 20 of your employees want to buy a ski pass, probably could get a discounted rate.
We weren't successful in that. We did look that route, and we also found it somewhat challenging to get enough staff to join in on a particular facility. So everyone knows we have some Sugar Bowl, some Squaw, some North Star, and so
Very loyal.
some Tahoe Donner. And we've had some, Tahoe Donner offering some discounts in the past for a cross-country ski pass for a day or something like that, and we're very thankful for that. We also looked into some of the gym memberships, the same thing, and it was hard to get enough, I think, commitment to a particular facility. But I think the Rec and Park recommendation is great.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Director Randall. To the left.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a few things. For the MOU, thank you for the red lines, because I know this has been a lot of work in process over the weeks, and so being newer to the process, it was good to see the red lines of what had been changed and what was deleted, what we had been talking about in the last few meetings, to have it all in one document. So I appreciated that. How often are the market adjustments? So how often are those studies where you are doing salary surveys? How often do we do that?
So we have historically been doing them every 3 to 5 years, and it's really kind of a case-by-case basis based on what we're seeing happening kind of economically and in the job market in general. And so, this is the first time that we've really done a comprehensive one on the represented side, because typically IBEW already has that data because it's their memberships for the electric side of the utilities. But this year we felt it was important because we knew that there were some significant impacts. One, because of the timing of our 5-year contract. That's a long contract for a labor agreement, COVID, and the wildfire impacts. So to answer your question, anywhere between 3 to 5 years, and there's different gradations of that. Sometimes we do a full comp and class study. Sometimes we've done just a kind of a check-in analysis. We identify some key positions that are kind of representative and fundamental and do a market analysis based on those. So taking a journeyman lineman, taking a water service operator, taking a customer service rep, and then an engineer 1 or 2, and then comparing from those 5 positions, trying to see where we're at as an organization.
And I'm in favor of that kind of analysis, because employees are important, and keeping them and recruiting them and making sure they're the right fit for the organization and keeping them is a big deal. So, so that's good. I'm in favor of that. And then lastly, part of that MOU, which I found really interesting, was talking about technology advancement. And it was talking about how, the advent of AI and some of this other sort of technological advances that may, you may need less employees or less of that. And there was the provision of keeping employees. So how does the district balance the technology advancement, which is good for the organization, yet you have employees with an organization who wants to fight to keep them there? So are our hands tied with that? I was trying to understand that.
No, I think
section.
there's some real opportunities there. And I think we've been successful on many fronts over the last 15 years. We've seen this already. It's just probably, that kind of engineering law and IT where the advancements speeds up incrementally all the time. And so these changes are happening more and more quickly, more and more rapidly for everyone. And things like AI and virtual reality are definitely posing new threats to all kinds of labor forces. And so what we've done successfully in the past, years ago, we had to manually read meters. And now we no longer have to do that. So that's a position that's no longer out there in the field. The days of seeing someone reading a meter out in the field with the stick, opening boxes, or with their glasses looking at a meter on the wall, those are all automated now. And so those positions kind of sunsetted, but we would take our staff and give them opportunities for development. And so we've seen, even in-house, our previous employees that were meter readers or meter techs are now a vegetation management manager or working on conservation programs or whatever it might be. And so finding the next thing for those staff to do. Other examples, I mentioned the reclassification of the customer service representative is finding additional value as some of the one-on-one engagement starts to diminish a little bit with technology. What other items can we train them in terms of professional development, either to work here at the district for extended years or find other career opportunities? So working in partnership with IBEW is going to be important. I think what you see, this provision in contracts is becoming more and more common. You've seen it in some of the union negotiations in the Midwest and in the South in the ports, where shipping ports are becoming more automated, trucking companies are becoming more automated. So there's a lot of concern and risk there. I think we have an opportunity to work with IBEW, the labor unions, and our unrepresented staff for opportunities to develop our value to this organization and opportunities for exciting new careers. So we're not interested in the business of laying off those positions. We want to take that investment in our team and improve them with technology.
And that provision didn't worry you?
No.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Director Morrell. Good. Tony?
No, thanks. Thanks for the presentation. I think it was a very valuable public discussion and clearly stated what's been going on for the last, several months. So I'm happy to see where we've landed and that, that we can hopefully try and maintain some employees living in the district, and also feeling like we have the ability to recruit and retain better, especially in the electric side, better than we were prior to this. So it is important. These jobs, the electric crews, the water crews, these jobs are getting more and more important as the years go on and as our environment changes. So, I appreciate the focus on the studies. It was a great question. I'm used to seeing the comprehensive reports come through before a negotiation so that you're getting the full comp and class study, looking at benefits, all benefits, aligned up through all the agencies that are compared and positions, and it really helps educate the board as well as the public and the employees about where they are in relation to other agencies. So, we aligned that with this negotiation, which is the right thing to do and gives us the tools to make these decisions. So, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all board members. I really appreciated your questions and comments and insights into this process. Negotiating, this is a big MOU, and it is not an easy task to do, to collate all this information and walk the line between being fair and generous and serving our constituents, and there's a lot of money involved, but I think we've landed in a good spot. I think this is a good contract. It is fair to everyone. Director Morrell, I so appreciate you bringing up that comment about technology, the role of evolving technology, and our human resource, which is really our most valuable resource, is our staff, are the people who work here. And I think having satisfying work is really vital to human happiness. So we have to continue to keep that in the forefront of our mind, even as our utilities and services evolve into the world of AI and tech continues to evolve. So anyhow, I agree. I think that it is clear the good work that went into this contract, and I'm very satisfied with the result. So on that note, do we have a motion?
I'll move staff's, our general manager's recommendation.
I'll second.
Very good. We have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Morrell?
Yes.
Director Randall?
Yes.
Director Bender?
Yes.
Vice President Lawley-Otis?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes. Wow. That was a big item. And we followed by 4 more big items. That brings us to action item number 21. Consideration for approval of the 2025 wage and compensation adjustments and adopt Resolution 2025-05, revisions to District Code Title IV Personnel. We are revising the district codes, section by section. It's exciting.
Me again.
Yep.
So as President Finn mentioned, this is item 21. Some of this is a little bit repetitive, but I want to kind of denote and put some additional emphasis on some of the differences here with respect to the unrepresented group or the exempt classification of our organization's staff. So as I mentioned earlier, we had 2 classifications of employees. Now we're focused on the provisions of compensation and benefits for our unrepresented team members. The kind of conditions and terms of employment and our compensation and benefits programs for the Truckee Donner PUD are outlined in District Code Title IV Personnel. And so if you review our district code, there's a lot of different components of terms and conditions of employment and kind of personnel processes codified in our policies collectively referred to as district code here. So we have 2 salary schedules that we maintain separately just because one's negotiated with IBEW and one's not. Each of those salary schedules are approved by the overseeing entities, IBEW, the Board of Directors, and then submitted to CalPERS, our benefits membership, for final review and documentation for our staff's pension and benefits plans. And so it's important that we manage those 2 salary schedules, approve those through this process, and also district code to change any provisions that are adjusted. And so I spoke about it earlier that, you know, the previous MOU with IBEW was effective 2020 through 2024. The unrepresented group doesn't have or doesn't maintain an MOU or an agreement or some sort of contract. It's what's in district code is that the general manager shall present for consideration to the board a compensation and benefits package for board review and consideration, and maintains fair and competitive salaries for all of our staff. And what we typically do, historically we've done, is each year or every couple of years, staff will bring in front of the board for consideration some adjustments or a plan of adjustments for the unrepresented staff to be executed through district code revisions. And really what the process is the general manager, in this case, over the last 4 or 5 years, myself, sit down with staff and kind of review the provisions as they are currently standing. And we also take into consideration some of the adjustments and changes that are happening or that have been approved or proposed for the IBEW staff. And so while IBEW has agreed upon MOU, the unrepresented staff we tend to address on a year-to-year basis. And so we've done that this year for the unrepresented as well. So last time this was adjusted was effective January 1st, 2024. We now have an opportunity to make some adjustments in alignment between the unrepresented staff and represented staff. So in November, not to be presumptive or kind of speculate on how the MOU would have, where we would have arrived with those tentative agreements, I began the process of meeting with our team to see what concerns and what value staff have in different benefits, and, you know, look at also the compensation study that was conducted by Moss Adams and our own internal studies with our competitive markets. And so staff engaged with Moss Adams to do a salary study, but also do a market study. So we did salary comparisons with our neighboring agencies, our water and power agencies in Northern California, with a particular emphasis on public agencies, We also did some analysis on job markets in the Truckee-Tahoe Basin, Washoe County, kind of areas that we're tied to economically and where our staff typically reside or commute from. And so kind of establishing what our competitive market is. And so after that review and a lot of discussions with staff, this evening, we are recommending some revisions to the compensation and benefits for the unrepresented staff, in particular to make sure that we're in alignment with some of the MOU adjustments to avoid certain phenomena referred to as compaction or kind of misalignment with positions that report to each other, and then really looking at some of our job descriptions and wage classifications based on those studies. So I'll get into a couple more details here. As I mentioned, the attachment to this agenda item includes a resolution that's for the provision of making modifications to district code. It includes an attachment for the recommended salary schedule and the red line of the district code as well. Some of the summary material changes, again, this is in alignment with the represented staff. We're recommending a 5.5 general wage increase for 2025. And very similar and equal revisions to holidays, adding the Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the Juneteenth National Independence Day, and an adjustment to longevity pay in alignment with the rest of the staff. This does a couple of things. It addresses some of the same challenges in recruitment and retention. For longevity, it's really more of an incentive. Also putting our holiday recognition more in alignment with some of our public partners and making sure that, in terms of recruitment and retention, we're kind of maintaining some of those same number of days throughout the year. Staff is also recommending some adjustments and reclassifications to a couple of positions throughout our salary schedule. And this, as I mentioned earlier, are really born out of the comp and class study where there's some misalignment of our job descriptions, the work those positions do, our job classifications, and then the comparative salaries across our job market. I mentioned earlier with the introduction of Mike Swanson, one of the changes and provisions in there that I'm outlining is the kind of division of the electric utility director into two key components, one being electric power supply. The district previously had in its salary schedule an electric power supply engineer that was also the assistant general manager of the organization. This goes back several years, but it's a position that we haven't staffed in several years. That position was at the top of our salary schedule, really was responsible for the oversight of the electric division in its entirety, particularly its power supply engineering strategies, and also served as the AGM. Recently, we've fielded a utility director position that was responsible for power supply and leadership over the engineering and operations staff. We're finding it increasingly more and more necessary every year to separate those responsibilities. It's become very taxing for a staff member to provide the attention to detail and bandwidth to power supply strategies, our partners with UAMPS, our IRP that we just developed, in order to maintain and stay on top of a lot of the regulatory changes and reporting requirements. This really has evolved into a standalone position. That being said, the electric engineering and operations team have put in place a lot of strategies for capital improvements, capital replacements. We are looking at things like the battery project, while it was put in consent calendar this evening to reject all bids. It's not something we're stopping, and we're going to continue to pursue those projects. The Martis Valley substation rebuild, we still have a lot of work to do. The board engaged with the public on kind of the wildfire safety and mitigation initiative with evaluating undergrounding versus insulated conductors versus synthetic poles, metal poles, a lot of strategies that we need to continue to work on that require a high level of attention and detail. So I have an asterisk by those. Financially, there's only a minor impact to budget. It's really unsubstantial. It's immaterial to some degree because we've vacated the assistant operations manager for at least for the time being, because that position was originally put in place to have some redundancy at the operations level. We haven't staffed that position. It's a budgeted position. The Director of Electric Engineering and Operations position has been designed to supplement and support the operations manager staff and our foreman and leadership staff at the engineering and operations level. And so from a budget perspective, there was some vacancies already there. This is filling those vacancies, and we'll have those included in the budget considerations later on this summer. Through the study, we've identified a need to reposition the electric engineering manager position to make it more in alignment with its roles and responsibilities. That position continues to grow in its kind of key functions and role with our strategic plan and some of the initiatives there. Director of Human Resources and Risk Management Department has grown. Our study has shown the necessity for a salary adjustment, also a recommendation for an additional FTE. We'll talk about that in budget. We're not recommending that this evening, but it's something we'll talk about in terms of risk management and HR. And then the finance accounting manager, communications program manager, risk and compliance program manager are all positions that we found out of alignment with their actual core responsibilities. And in order to have a fair compensation and benefit study, making those adjustments, our study from Moss Adams and our own research reflected that necessary changes there. And really, those positions had been previously characterized or categorized as specialists, and they're really more in alignment as an industry standard as program managers that we see reflected in other agencies. And then the final one here is Information Technology Director and CIO. There's an asterisk on this that the district has a provision in its compensation schedule or salary schedule that there is a 5% stipend for a leadership position at the ELT that's designated as the AGM. Scott Crow has been determined to be our dedicated position as AGM in the coming years. And so I just wanted to note that provision's always been in place. We've left that AGM position vacant for a few years. Previously, it was a position that was staffed routinely, and we found it necessary, more and more necessary to staff that position again. This is the same chart earlier. It's the same net impact to customer rates. Also gives a dollar value if that's a more beneficial format to kind of interpret this. And some of the same provisions you saw in the fiscal impact of the MOU, we're taking it holistically here as all of the adjustments together. There's a $10.4 million in electric and $7 million water reserve fund balance that was more than sufficient to account for the revisions in fiscal year 25. Also in alignment with our financial master plan. As I mentioned earlier, for future adjustments, those will be brought to the board for consideration in the budget cycle later this year. Staff recommendation is threefold here. Number one, approve the unrepresented technical engineering and management wage and compensation adjustments as proposed in the red line document. Adopt Resolution 2025-05, approving those revisions to District Code Title IV. And then finally, approve the 2025 unrepresented employee wage schedule. And I'm happy to answer any questions while I take a drink of water.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have any public comments on this action item this evening? Seeing none. Bringing it back to the directors for questions, comments, and discussion. Back to the left, it's all good. Tony?
Same comments as
Same,
before.
yeah, very.
I have a couple questions. So basically, you're recommending a 5.5% COLA, okay? And then, am I understanding correctly that you're also recommending wage adjustments for the various positions that were listed up there? And I didn't see, you have numbers, but I didn't see percentages or anything like that. You know, I wasn't here when you did the comp study, so I don't know exactly how that came out, but I just wanted to clarify that it's two things you're recommending, a COLA at 5.5%, and then also wage adjustments.
Yes, that is correct. And so I haven't highlighted each percentage increase. They're various based on where they're put on the salary schedule. The red line salary schedule outlines where those adjustments were made. So you should see a red line strikeout of where they previously resided on the schedule and where the proposed adjustments are. Those are based on data from the classification studies, compensation studies. So you're correct. The recommendation is a 5.5 general wage increase in alignment with the MOU, and then some classification adjustments based on our studies.
So I think just for future edification, that should be included in the packet. So should the public wish to see how this came about, they can see that, as well as myself. So.
I appreciate the recommendation, duly noted, and we'll incorporate that in future staff reports.
Brian, I did have a quick question. On the salary schedules, there's a salary code, so call it M54 or whatever. Is there a simple percentage difference between an M51 and an M52?
There's a 2.5% increase between each of the
Okay.
categories there.
Okay.
So there are some categories that aren't utilized in the scale based.
Sure.
And so what CalPERS likes to see is a predetermined salary schedule with all of its incremental increases, and then the positions in each of those schedule spots so that they can do their review and kind of establish their history. Some wage schedule levels get compressed or collapsed because they're not utilized. There's no positions in them, just to make it so the document isn't reams and reams long. But Director Liotis, or Vice President Liotis, those are 2.5% increments.
So if a position was redlined at M50 and moved to M51, that's essentially a 2.5%
Yep.
adjustment based on the reclassification.
Yep.
I have one other question, and that is, you did the study in October. Why, and I'm assuming all these increases will be retroactive to January 1? Is that
Yes.
correct? Why weren't they put in January 1 in line with the budget, or did you have a placeholder for it, or does it need to wait for the the MIU with IBEW, or just why did we wait?
In general, the reason why is we want to see what comes out of the IBEW negotiations so that any adjustments, particularly in benefits, if there's adjustments in benefits that from a kind of an equity perspective, but also administrative perspective, that we're making all the adjustments at the same time. And in most cases, we, even with IBEW, we're working a little bit with retroactivity because we get up against the end of the calendar. There's a couple other things that have to be completed. Next thing you know, we're in February or March, and so it goes back retroactive to January 1st. If we were to agree to and propose the adjustments to the unrepresented staff, there is a risk that it could either favorably or unfavorably influence the negotiations of the IBEW represented group. And so it's not really a good process to have some adjustments implemented with a portion of the staff when you're in negotiations with another represented group.
Sure. So then a follow-up, why do we wait for IBEW? Why are we doing it 3 months after the fact? Why don't we start earlier with them?
We started in October, and that typically is sufficient time, but scheduling conflicts and other kind of conflicts created some delays there. And then we also had some board rescheduling of meetings. So at the end of the day, with some adjustments and conflicts in schedules, we ended up in March.
So, okay, and so in terms of budgeting, I'm assuming you put a placeholder in?
Our finance team typically puts a reserve placeholder of 3.5% to 4% as an assumption if we don't have an actual agreed upon metric. And so that was kind of why I put that graphic in the last presentation where the salary over the last 5 years have been a 3.8% average increase. That's kind of in alignment with what Mike does for budget placeholders, a 3.5% to 4%, somewhere in there. And if there's a deviations from that, we budget accordingly.
Thank you.
Do we have anything else from the director standpoint? Everybody
Fully
is
vetted.
satisfied? Fully vetted?
There we are,
Okay.
good. So we're,
Do we have to approve all of these actions individually? This might be a council question. We're approving a resolution, we're approving the wage schedule and the wage and compensation adjustments. Can we do that all together?
Yes. You
Okay.
can do it all together. You're not required to do them separately.
Okay. And do
Your
I have-
choice. You could choose to take them separately if you like.
No, I think I'm very comfortable doing them all together. if that's-
I'll move staff's recommendation as presented.
Very good.
Items
I'll
1,
second.
2, and 3.
All right.
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Director Morrell?
Yes.
Director Randall?
Yes.
Director Bender?
yes.
Vice President Lawliotis?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes. Okay, very good. Back to the agenda. There we go. Oops. Backed out a little too far. Okay, item number 22, consideration of approval of the 2024 quarter four power cost adjustment, the PCA, of .0337 credits per kilowatt hour billed in March and April in 2025. An exciting item, and Mr. Salmon is going to present for us.
Good evening, President Finn, members of the board. Item 22, PCA. So first, a little background on purchase power. It's close to 15 million budget for 2024. It represents 48% of our operating expenses. It's 32%, about a third of our use of funds for the electric budget. And on the budget is based on, that 15 million is based on 174,000 megawatt hours purchased at an average cost per megawatt hour of $85.77 for the budget. The cost varies by the market and our various sources, and is yet to be determined until we get into it. We set this budget in the fall of 2023, and we were pretty fresh off the sting of pretty volatile, particularly natural gas rates that, and I'll show that in a slide coming up, that definitely cost the district quite a bit of money. We actually dipped into reserves. So in the budget process in fall of 2023, we introduced this concept of a power cost adjustment for the district. It was new to us, but it was not new to the industry. Many utilities have this, and it's a way of addressing with our customers on a more frequent basis the volatility of the wholesale purchase power cost that is a component of our rate increase. And in that, in the ordinance that we passed, we have a quarterly power cost adjustment up to 15%, and then after 15%, we also, either direction, we would look to our rate reserve to either fund it more if things were in a savings mode beyond 15%, or if they were exceeding 15% in cost, we would use some rate reserve funds. I think I covered the nature of this for the most part. It does introduce a bit of volatility to a customer's monthly bill because in the past, you just had whatever was adopted in budget and the rate increase for electric was, or if there was one, would just be reflected and maybe adjusted the next time you did budget. Now there's another line item on your budget for power cost adjustment. We're still one page for electric and water instead of 4 pages, Southwest Gas and others. A little bit of history. We had a credit in Q1, small credit in Q1, a small charge in Q2, almost 1 cent per kilowatt hour in Q3, and then Q4 is much larger adjustment, almost just over 3 cents per kilowatt hour. This is for the fourth quarter. On the left is last year's cost. The solid bar is the total cost, and then the middle bar is budget, and to the right is the actual for quarter 4 cost. And you'll see that the cost per megawatt hour was budgeted at $83.56, and we came in 16% below that at just over $70 per megawatt hour. Part of that was the nature of natural gas prices. They're still relatively low. The high spike there is the chaos back in 2022, 2023. They have remained low. And then you have the nuances of the Western region and natural gas prices in the Western region as well. That was for the U.S., that chart. We did have, speaking of that, we have a component of our energy costs is the purchase of the wholesale power itself from the various plants that we have and utilize, and solar, but we also have transmission costs, and then we also have a thing called the energy imbalance market, and we get a monthly bill for the EIM, energy imbalance market. And in quarter 4, we actually had a credit of $189,000 versus a budget of a cost of $118,000. And so that's quite, we're not privy to all the details of that calculation. It's done by NV Energy. They pass it along a couple months, a month and a half after the month closes. We do think that perhaps in this particular quarter, the abundance of hydro in the West may have helped in the pricing of the energy imbalance market here in this region, and we benefited favorably from that. So with a budgeted cost of $118,000 and a credit of $189,000, that combines for a $307,000 favorable variance. So a nice credit, right, in our purchase costs. UAMPS also has an annual operating budget, as we do, and they pass along that when their results for their fiscal year, which I think ends in March or maybe June, when they reconcile their year and they're under budget or over budget, they pass along that variance back to their participants in UAMPS, their partners. And we received a credit in Q4 of $211,000. That is budgeted about $150,000, but it's spread in the past, in this current budget, it's kind of spread over all our costs for the year. So it's more impactful for the quarter, for this quarter that we're calculating. So that was another nuance of our power costs for Q4. This is the details of the calculation that's in the staff report that calculates out to just over 3 cents per kilowatt hour. And so from a retrospective view, our all-in cost to our customers for per kWh, and when I mean all in, I mean not just the energy charge, but also the monthly service fee, the flat rate portion of the bill. That's the most common way that cost per kilowatt hour is looked at, was almost 23 cents. And then factoring in this credit, it would be just at 19.5 cents, 19.6 cents per kilowatt hour. And then prospectively, when these credits come on the bills in March and April, as presented, as recommended, this equates to about, on average per account per month, of $32.28 based on the estimated March and April KWH that will be consumed by our accounts. Stepping back at 2024 in total, this is our budget and actual megawatt hours, total cost, and the cost per megawatt variance. And the total cost per megawatt variance was 10% to budget. So we had a conservative budget. It was built into rates to be conservative. You want to be conservative in budget. And what's happened is the cost, that conservatism and the cost per megawatt hour that we purchased was not as great as we anticipated. And we're passing that along back to the customer on a quarterly basis. And so the breakdown of the cost variance of 1.6 million was almost 1.5 million, or 10%, based on that cost per megawatt hour. And we've given a fair amount of that back to the customers in previous PCAs for 2024. And then the rest is recommended in this action item tonight. And then a small amount of the variance of the $1.6 million variance was due to the volume variance that we actually sold. Little bigger picture perspective. This is the federal BLS, Bureau of Labor and Statistics, comparison of the USA and the San Francisco market for cost per kilowatt hour for December each year, 2020 through 2024. And you'll see that, I'll get into specifics here on the next page, but the San Francisco market is almost double the US average cost per kilowatt hour of, and then translating that to our rates, the blue bar is the US on the previous chart. The 37 is San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward on the previous chart. And then for 2023 is a gray bar in the middle at almost 20 cents per kilowatt hour. The 22.3 is the 12% rate increase for 2024 that we adopted. And then the 21.4 cents per kilowatt hour is post the 2024 power cost adjustments. So the effective cost difference is about 4.6%, from 12.1 to 7.5. So great news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's working.
This recommended tonight power cost adjustment has been accrued in the financial statements for 2024, so that it's not a financial impact in 2025. You wouldn't want that to happen. I'll get into more of that later. And then just one other thing. It is based on an estimate of March and April's KWH that is purchased by our accounts, our customers, and then we'll true that up again. But it's not estimated to be a large true up. Those are more stable months. But anyway, we true up the PCA each quarter for past quarters. So the recommendation this evening is to approve the power cost adjustment for 2024 Q4 of 0.0337 credit per KWH billed in March and April of 2025.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments on our PCA, power cost adjustment, for Q4? Seeing none. Comments and questions from the board? Yes.
Yeah. I have one question, and maybe this is a question for communications, but when we have good news like this, do we share that with our ratepayers on their bill or something? Is it communicated at all, or is it they just notice and get excited for the month, or do we promote that?
I am sure we plan to communicate this good news story.
Okay. Great.
Any other board questions, comments, thoughts? Director Randall.
Courtney's, that was my same comment. I think that it's really important that the public understands they're getting a rebate, not they just used less energy last month.
Thank you, Director Randall. It is the former, not the latter.
I think it's a great recommendation, it's something we can carry forward. I think it'd be prudent for us also to include some education so that we're not, because of the market volatility of power, where a significant credit could potentially be a charge in a different quarter. So I don't want to celebrate too much. Just but these types of, I think where we need to do some more outreach and education is the fact that we have this power cost adjustment in place, because our customers, our ratepayers, in real time, almost quarterly at least, can see the impacts of the markets on their rates and those adjustments. And what Mike hasn't touched on yet and will in either later this evening or in future reports is coming back to our ratepayers with the actual net effective rate increase as a percentage compared to budget. And so the board had approved a 12% rate increase for the electric utility for 2024. That may not be actually what the rate increase was, the net effect of this power cost adjustment. It's likely to have been less than that. So what we can definitely communicate and present to our community is what that net effect is.
So this is just going to create a little more challenging rate study for Sean Corn when he comes back, because we approved 12.1%, but then we're only getting 7.5. So now,
Yeah, essentially.
yeah, yep.
Well, I also think it's very valuable to sort of stress the transparency part. Like we ended up paying less for power, and we are handing it right back to our
Absolutely.
customers. We are not.
But only
Nothing else
publish
has
the
happened.
good news.
Well, I think I think only highlight it, the good news. It's not like we're hiding the bad. And I think to be very clear, we should be, again, the educational process continues, and there's a lot of educating to be done in this sector. So yeah, sometimes volatility in the market is real, and we may be seeing more of it. I mean, we're living in a moment that is extremely uncertain right now. So, I think our customers have to understand that as well. There's a lot that is not under our control. So yeah, this is very good news. I'm happy that this tool is working in the way that we hoped that it would. It's nice to see that UAMPS is essentially doing the same thing and maybe has been doing it for a long time. I actually don't know that, but yeah, I'm super happy. And Alex, I'm sure we'll be hearing about this all over the media in the next 30 days. Right on. Do we have a motion, unless anybody else has anything to add? Nope. Okay, good. Do we have a motion and a second?
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Second, anyone?
I'll second.
Thank you. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Morrell?
Yes.
Director Randall?
Yes.
Director Bender?
Yes.
Vice President Laliotis?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes. Great, exciting
you.
stuff. Thank you, Mike. And I think you're staying there, huh? Because item number 23 is considering acceptance of the district's fiscal year end 2024 budget performance review and fund transfers. It's more dense numbers for us.
Bring us the numbers, Mike.
Here's the numbers.
More good news.
Hey, whoa.
What's going on? It's good news night. Nice graphic.
All right. This is agenda item number 23, budget performance review for fiscal year 2024. The agenda, the flow this evening for this item will be a district overview, brief, then we'll get into the electric utility, then we'll cover the water utility, and then we'll talk a little bit about things impacting 2025. District Code Section 3.02, Budget Control. specifies a semi-annual budget performance review at a board workshop. This is actually an action item / workshop, such that if we did want to approve a transfer to or from a particular reserve account, we could do that. But don't have any of those recommended this evening, but wanted to make sure that was out there. The fiscal year 24 that we just completed and fiscal year 25, that is active budget, was approved by the board November 1st of 2023 by Resolution 2023-15. The net position of the district is $165 million. The operating revenues are $57 million. So the board is in charge of a $57 to $60 million annual budget, as well as the staff in this room. The number of employees are 88, 83 regular full-time and five board members. Little breakdown on the electric and water. Not going to read everything here. Just covered the 174,000 megawatt hour budget, 38 million in revenues, 19 for electric, 19 for water, 107 million in utility plant assets for electric, and 159 million for the water utility. So diving into the electric utility for 2024, operating revenue was 37.1 million. Missed the mark, under budget, 1.1 million. Why is that? That's because we did the PCA adjustment and gave back 1.5 million in revenues back to our customers because we overcharged essentially for we had lower cost per megawatt hour and returning that back to the customer. When you exclude that, we were slightly ahead of budget, $400,000. Just for the nuances of each account is different. Some have KW demand charges on the commercial level or larger meters, et cetera, and the usage is by account. We had 0.6% account growth, which is consistent with budget. I think at 0.5%. I covered purchase power at 13.2 million. 1.6 million or 11% under budget, and so I've covered that one. I'm going to move from right to left for this slide. Net other cash flows were negative 1.0 million. So $1 million net in other cash flows. This is stuff that's not considered operating in nature. Okay. And that negative $1 million is 48,000 or 5% below budget. That's a favorable variance when you have a negative outflow. So the majority of that was the $50,000 more in investment income for the operating accounts of 285,000. That was 50 grand more than budget, driven by the interest rate market. As well as our new investment vehicle that the board approved in our California class JPA brokerage that I believe is facilitated through these Special Districts Association of California. In that million of net cash outflows, that included a transfer as budgeted to vehicle reserves of $844,000. To rate reserves, 506,000. A portion of that, 378,000, I believe, is for replenishment over 2024 through 2028 for our draw in 2023. And then the rest is just to cover inflation of the cost of purchase power that's anticipated in budget. We had no transfers to or from capital reserves. There was none budgeted. And then we had 431,000 in debt service, paying our mortgage. On the left side, you have 14.9 million operating expenses. Those were 1.7 million or 10% favorable below budget. The components of that I'll get into on the next page. a bit of the breakdown, but it was $1 million for the electric operations department specifically, and then $700,000 or 9% for all the other support departments related to the electric utility. So on the left, for electric operations, operating expenses were $8 million. This doesn't include capital costs. This is strictly electric operations. And it was $1 million or 10% below budget. Wages were fairly consistent with budget, slightly over. And then overheads were 6% below budget. Vendor expenses were the big item, $880,000 favorable to budget. So pouring through a few hundred lines of detail for this department, there's about $308,000 in timing items that were budgeted in '24 and they're not budgeted in '25. And we anticipate those being presented to the board for approval to be expended in 2025. So we still want to do those specific things, but they're going to happen in '25, not '24, and they weren't budgeted in both years per se. We spent $1.9 million, roughly of $2 million in vegetation and veg hazard defensible space work. You know, that's a big line item in this budget, $2 million. We spent about 1.9, you know, the nuances of organizing those contractors and doing all that work at various places. And so a little bit under budget there. And then a lot of small dollar items that added up to $463,000 under budget. So miscellaneous line items. I couldn't find any specific things that were jumping out that warranted calling out in the hundreds of thousands of dollars type nature there to bring up. So that's the tail of the tape on that side of the page. On the right side, we have $700,000 on all the other operations, $6.9 million in cost, which was $700,000 or 9% below budget. These are the various categories here. Some of these are timing between years. Some of them are things we planned to do that we didn't get to. They might have been budgeted, but none of them were dramatic in their cost elements. On the capital expenditure side, this is the outflow of cash, $6.6 million. And that was 6.7 or 50% below budget. So budget, this isn't, you know, actual versus budget on the project itself that was approved. It was just in total amount of projects that were anticipated in the budget versus what we actually executed on. We spent $6.6 million. And the list of projects is on the right. I won't read them off in the essence of time, but those are the categories of types of projects that were accomplished for the electric utility in 2024. On the left side, just below the 6.7 million below budget, 50%. Look at, these are essentially these are the buckets of how you're funding your capital projects. So some of your projects were identified in budget to be funded by rate revenues from the current year's rates. And that was a $800,000 favorable variance. Other other capital expenditures were planned to be purchased through utilizing funds in the vehicle reserve. Okay, when we procure a vehicle, we use vehicle reserve funds, cash sitting in the bank to fund those projects. And we had $1 million in savings there because of delay in projects, delay in delivery of vehicles. Okay, so they may be ordered, but they're not here yet, so we haven't paid for them. And then we had a large $4.9 million in capital reserve funded projects favorable variance. Okay, and that's on the bottom right. The notable delayed versus budget not expended capital projects included $2.3 million in land and building. As you know, we're working on a facilities master plan, and we've been working on it quite a while, and there's been delays in that, but it's still active and ongoing. Budget anticipated expending $2.3 million in 2024, and we did not on that project. For the Morris Valley substation, it's well underway in planning, but we anticipated in budget to be under construction and spend $2 million in construction. We haven't quite gotten there yet. So that's a timing delay, so we didn't use the capital reserve that we thought we were going to use for that project. Same with the BESS battery storage project. We anticipated being under construction in 2024, and we're not. We're still in planning there. And I mentioned the vehicle procurement delays. All right. So this all nets for net operating cash flow of $2.6 million for the electric utility, which is $3 million greater than budget. We had a negative impact from operating revenues, $1.6 million from purchased power, and favorable $1.7 million in operating expenses, and $800,000 in capital. So that's the sum of that $3 million. Where the rubber meets the road is our reserve balances. These are the key reserve balances. I apologize, it might be a little small font size, but I wanted to try and get it on one page. So the operating reserve in particular is at $10.7 million balance at year end. And that caught me a little bit by surprise, just in the essence of the number, putting it on the page, it's too high. And so you need to look a little deeper, and that's what's shown here. Is we take the 10.7 million, we reduce the PCA that's coming in March and April, and a little bit of actually Q3 that hadn't hit yet. It'll hit in 2025, and so that's 1.1 million. Then we had 300,000 in those items that we thought we were going to spend in 24, we're going to spend in 25, and then we know we're going to have an impact from the previous the two previous agenda items before PCA in compensation costs that are going to eat into our operating reserve balance. So taking those nuances out, our balance is very close to what we anticipated at the end of 2024. And consistent with our policy balance of 50% of our operating expenses. Half a year. The rate reserve balance is at $6 million, consistent with the budget financial master plan. And that's 376 each year that we're replenishing it through 24 and 28. Capital reserve balance is higher than anticipated due to the capital that I talked about earlier that had been delayed primarily. Same with vehicle reserve. That balance of 1.9 million is quite a bit higher than anticipated because of the delay in vehicles. We have still have the now 7 million from the debt issuance in 2022 that we have not expended, and budget anticipates spending that money in 2025, and we need to identify projects over the last 3 years through June of 2025 and expend those funds. It'll essentially, in essence, be a transfer out of this restricted funds and move the actual cash into capital reserve. So, but we, excuse me, we need to, and I'll be presenting this to the board over the next few months, within the next few months, to expend those project funds so that we can get it off the books. So that's the electric utility. I can pause for electric, or I can keep rolling with water. Board's preference.
Everybody good?
Let it flow.
Let it flow. Let's get the water.
Great. Next, we'll talk about the water utility. Almost 20 million in operating revenue, was 300,000 or 2% over budget. And that's just the nuance of billings between various accounts and rates and things like that, just the normal movement of things. I did want to point out that the gallons billed per day per account was up 12% to 2023. It's up 2% to the 3-year average. So when you look back, just in 2024, we had dry conditions. The dry summer started earlier than in 2023 and kind of continued. and we had account growth similar to electric and consistent with budget. Right-hand side of the page, net outflows of other activities, non-operating, was 1.7 million, 30,000 below budget, 2%, driven by the investment income similar to electric. Outflows included, the main one is at the bottom for debt service, $2 million, consistent with budget, of course. So that's the main component of this outflow of 1.7 million. From facility fees for debt service, to help pay that debt service, we had 359,000. That's been the last 20 years. That's an approximate number. A portion of it is utilized with facility fees from a debt issuance. I want to say about 20 years ago. I don't remember the exact year. We also have a Donner Lake surcharge that's $100,000, and that continues for about another 10 years, I think. And then no transfers in or out to capital reserves, and then 2 vehicle reserves to continue to fund that for the replenishment of vehicles. Replacement of vehicles was $484,000, consistent with budget. On the left side, 12.7 million in operating expenses, 3% below budget, 340,000. The water operations was essentially spot on to budget in their expenses, and then all the other cost centers summed up to 310,000, rounded 6%. So on the left is water operations of 7.6 million, again, spot on to budget. Some of the nuances, wages and overheads were right on with budget. And then vendor expenses were also on budget in total. Looking through that detail, they did underrun 114,000 in pumping charges of 1.5 million. And overran in 32,000 in environmental compliance related cost, and 64,000 or 1% over in all other cost. I would step back just one quick second, just a reminder that we don't just spend over budget to spend over budget or under budget. I mean, things under 15,000 are subject to general manager approval, and then our internal approvals, and then anything over 15,000 does go to the board for approval, irrespective of budgets per district code.
You said 15 or 50?
15.
15.
15,000. Yep. On the right side is 5.1 million for all other operations for the water utility support, board, general management, et cetera. Had a slight overage in administrative services that was driven by an overhead budget problem, primarily, and that's corrected in 25. And then in IT, overran there because that's about 90,000, because we anticipated charging some IT labor to water SCADA capital project, and that did not occur. That project did not occur, and so the labor was charged to operating expenses. So that labor was doing other things for SCADA that were not of a capital nature, so it got charged to operating expenses instead of capital. Speaking of capital expenditures of 6.9 million for the water utility. The list of projects dominated by pipeline replacement, very important, particularly with respect to water leaks and just keeping up with our infrastructure and aging infrastructure. We finished the ski run tank replacement for 1.3 million, as well as the about 600,000 to finish up the 6170 new tank out there. We did utilize facility fee funds consistent with budget and anticipated in budget. We spent 195,000 of facility fee funds for 30. The new tank, 32% of all the costs of that tank was funded via facility fees, expansion side, and then we had 11,000 in Red Mountain tank connections to pay that, paid with facility fees. And then So that variance of the 6.9 million in capital expenditures were 1.1 million or 19% over budget, not under budget. And that was driven primarily by the timing of capital projects for our debt that we issued. We didn't quite finish in 2023, so it rolled over into 24. So again, this isn't over in the specific project. This is just an overage when you look at a budget anticipated expenditure versus actual timing of projects. So around 300,000 and basically at break even in net cash flow, $30,000 for the water utility was 440,000 greater than budget, favorable. And these are the components that I've gone over. 340,000 in operating revenues favorable, 340,000 in operating expenses favorable were the main areas there. So where are we at on reserves for water utility? Essentially, the water utilities reserve balances are at where we anticipated in budget in the financial master plan at the end of fiscal year 24, within margin. And we've spent all of the, Chad and Neil and his team have spent all of the debt issuance projects on time. So thank you, Chad. And good work. All right, moving on to notables, impacts on fiscal year of 25 since the budget adoption of fiscal year 25 budget in November of 2023. You know about the personnel rate of pay and range adjustments, economic volatility is all over the place. And then we had some new information since the staff report and the board agenda published. We received communication from Standard & Poor's that they were changing our rating outlook, not our rating, but our rating outlook from stable to negative. So we have the electric utility. This is specific to the electric utility. The electric utility has a rating of A+, but it's the outlook with that A+, it's like a subcategory of rating, was stable back when we did the debt issuance. And they're telling us that they're potentially going to change that any day now to A+, a negative outlook. And we're not alone. The report has not officially come out. They said it was going to come out today, but checking right before this meeting, I did not see any information released yet. But what that means is that at the end of the day, that means that any future debt issuance of electric utility, if our rating did get decreased, it would mean that our interest rate would go up. What specifically, cannot say today. But it would mean that our interest rate, maybe instead of 4.5, it's 4.75 or 5%, something like that. But I can't speak specifically to what that rate would be, nor do we know what interest rates will be if and when we did plan to issue some debt for electric. The commentary that's been communicated so far, and certainly we'll be sharing with the board, is the S&P is looking at all POUs, not just IOUs, but they're looking at POUs and looking at the wildfire risk and the inverse condemnation laws of California. And despite our best efforts and all the things we do for wildfire prevention, there's still a high risk for electric utilities out there. And so I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Brian. But.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize, kind of reemphasize the fact that this ratings adjustments from Standard & Poor's is really driven, and it's really driven by the kind of innate risk, wildfire risk that electric utilities have in California, and particularly in the region with we provide the service. So the Sierra Nevada some of the higher fire risk areas in California. They're reevaluating this. We saw this when we did the initial debt issuance a few years back. The district was through the kind of evaluation process, we kind of received an unfavorable mark because we didn't have in place PSOMs or PSPS, preemptive power outage protocols in place to avoid our system, igniting some sort of fire. And we had a lot of discussions with the folks doing the ratings, the underwriters, that, what our strategies were at the time. And what's interesting is what's coming out in the preliminary reports explaining these kind of unfavorable adjustments is, regardless if you have these preventative or preemptive power outage systems in place or other wildfire mitigation protocols in place, regardless of whether you have those or not, publicly owned utilities are still receiving this unfavorable adjustment or potential unfavorable adjustment. And so what we're seeing is the risk of the liabilities for utilities in California related to wildfire is having an impact on the financial ratings of utilities across the state. So it's really driven wildfire risk and the regulatory impacts, legislative impacts of inverse condemnation and other kind of unfunded mandates from the state.
This is just a little bit more information. So the yellow, this is the column here. This yellow is the A+ current electric rating. And what they're saying is that this was A+ stable, and now it's going to be A+ negative. And the negative means there's a 1 in 3 chance within the next 1 or 2 years that this rating may fall to here or could go to here. But we don't know, and they don't say. And then this is water's rating here, just for information. These are Moody's and Fitch here. And then bonus credit, a couple of financial metrics, just to see, how and where the, this is net capital assets. So net is after depreciation of our investment in infrastructure. Utilities are highly capital intensive, so it's important to know where you're at with your capital, both at a gross amount and a net amount. And then net position, that's like your net worth, your net equity. If you have $100,000 in cash and $100,000 in debt on day one, your net worth is zero, right? Because you have a mortgage, you have debt. And so the good news here, it's all good news. The net position, the net capital assets continues to improve, which means we're not essentially depreciating. I'm just looking on a per account basis. And then, so that continues to grow, not decline. If it was declining rapidly or declining, we'd want to, we didn't keep up with depreciation would be one way to simplify it. And then net position, that's your net equity, your net worth, your retained earnings. The net position, again, did improve both to last year and to 2020. The 2024 is unaudited, just a reminder. You don't see them here, but the audit is, we're sending them stuff every day, and they're going to start field work first week of April. So in short order, we'll have audited financial statements and be presenting that to the board and producing a 2024 ACFR. And then the other thing I was going to point out was, it's interesting that electric utilities' net position is greater than their net assets, and it's inverse for water. And that's because electric utility has $6 million in long-term debt, and water utility has $25 million in long-term debt. Trivia question of the day. Still good numbers. And neither utility, just mentioning that, neither utility is highly leveraged. Another way of saying they do not have a lot of debt in relation to their amount of assets and activity. They don't have a lot of debt compared to their peers. Electric utility has a nominal amount of debt, very, very, very small debt. And then electric utility has more debt, but, 25 million in long-term debt, but it's still not a lot in relation to the amount of gross assets and net assets that they own and operate. So, okay. There's no direct fiscal impact associated with this item other than transfers between reserve accounts, if any. And the recommendation this evening is, one, to accept this report of the budget performance for 2024 end of year, which includes variances identified since the adoption of the budget for 2024 and 25. And then two, authorize internal book transfers as of 12/31/2024 as follows. There's no recommendations for electric or water. We've had those the last few years where we're transferring from operating to capital or to rate reserve and vice versa. But there's none, as I showed in the presentation. I'm not recommending any for 2024. So
Right on.
I turn it back over to President Finn.
Great. Thank
Thank
you very much, Mike. Do we have any public comments on this item? I still see none. Okay. Again, back to board questions, deliberations, and comments. Does anybody have questions about this report of budget performance?
Water reserves. Mike, could you please take us back to that water reserve page?
Sure.
Yeah, right there. I just didn't have enough time. So there we are, 4.4, we're trying to get to 8. Is that correct?
Long-term, we're trying to get to 8, and that's in the 10-year financial master plan to get to 8. Yep.
It's been a long-term struggle for us.
Yes, and we're contributing how much, again, per year into that? Did you have that number in there, or no?
Not off the top of my head.
I thought I saw that. That was,
Too, actually.
I thought there was some
I don't-
376,000 number, and maybe that was going somewhere else.
Yeah, there was, for the near term, there was no funding to the capital reserve. So by issuing the debt and spending debt money, the water utility spending debt money in 22, 23, and into 24, we didn't use any reserves. And then over time, it's going to build back up. I don't have the 10-year financial plan at my fingertips to tell you how long it's going to take. But I do know that $4.4 million balance is substantially higher than it was in 2021. It was like 1 million.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gaining on it.
We're gaining.
You might recall when we did the previous rate study and board review and adoption of the water rates, there was a 5-year water rate plan. And we're going to talk about the next rate schedule here later this summer. But we had a review of those 2 smiley faces, the charts that we
I've
had.
been thinking about the smiley face. Are we past the bottom of the smile, or are we are we actually?
We're actually headed up, and it's no longer a smirk, it's turning into a grin.
Okay, that's what I really needed to know.
And so, if you recall, we had alignment through that rate schedule where the rate schedule curve was in alignment with the financial master plan curve to achieve specific reserve goals at the 10-year and 15-year mark. And so we'll bring those back in a subsequent presentation here in the coming weeks, also to prepare for budget and water rates so we can play with those again and we can show you exactly where we're at. But as Mike said, it was a little bit of a kind of a handshake transfer between the debt issuance and expenditure of capital reserves. We did the we were trying to make some pretty dramatic recoveries. We issued debt to balance that depletion out and start recovering. And so now with the conclusion of this 5-year rate cycle and going into the next one, we can align that with the financial master plan and continue that growth back to where we want it to be.
Okay, so rock bottom is behind us.
Yes.
Okay, of the lowest point in water reserves. Okay, that's really makes me feel good. So, thank you.
Right on. Thank you, Director Bender. Any other comments from the board? Yeah, Director Morel.
I just want to piggyback a little bit on what Jeff was saying. So with the reserves, is that 10-year plan, is that aggressive? Is that conservative? Is that something that's going to be coming up in the next budget cycle to reevaluate that schedule?
It's looked at every 2 years as part of the budget process, absolutely. And so the budget approval not only includes the 2-year detailed budget for the upcoming 2 years, but it also, it technically also includes the 10-year financial master plan and the game plan. And, we're looking at things like if there's any spikes in rate increases, can we even that out a little bit? And then what are the capital needs? In the consent agenda this evening was not only the rate study, but also updating the 10-year capital improvement plan for water. And so that'll be dovetail into the 10-year financial master plan that is part of the budget process. And we will be reviewing that in depth at one, if not 2 or 3 workshops.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Laliotis, any questions? Okay,
Thumbs up.
I'm pretty good.
No, I mean,
I'm
no.
good too. A lot of information.
There's a lot of information, but Mike, kudos to you. You've come a long way in your presentations.
And your
Why, thank you.
graphics.
I think that was good, right?
No, that was.
All good
no,
vibes.
no, honestly, it was not that they weren't clear, but this was very informational. It was very easy to follow. You hit all the high points. Everything made sense, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I know you're not alone. You have a staff behind you that supports you in getting these figures and numbers to make it onto these slides. So I appreciate that. And just in general, just thank you to staff, because that good news is a result of everyone's collective efforts in operations, in finance, in all the things we do to collectively come together and see these numbers. So thank you to everyone involved in producing these numbers. So.
Awesome.
Agree with all of that. Just one really quick question. Our debt, that we have to spend it this year, right? That's 7 million on the
Wait, no,
electric
I thought
side.
Mike congratulated Chad on spending it
No,
all.
Chad spent the water side, but the electric side is still
Oh,
hanging
sorry.
out there. Is that, and you said what we're going to be doing is assigning that to projects that we've completed over the past 2 or 3 years?
So the debt issuance details, the covenants, if you will, specify that we need to spend the project funds within 3 years, which is June of 2025. It does not have to be the land and building. It can be other projects as long as they're capital in nature. And so we will, what we'll do is work with bond counsel to ensure that we're in compliance with the bond covenants, which means spending the project funds by June of 2025. And we can retrospectively look at capital projects that we funded with either capital reserve or rate funds, and categorize them as these are a use of the debt issuance. Okay. And so in essence, it'll be a transfer from project funds to capital reserve.
Okay, so it's not, it's coming up mighty quick, June
Yes.
of 2025. Okay, that was the only thing that I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to, it was making me a little anxious. But
Understood.
we have a solution.
Yeah, we're okay.
It's okay, great, awesome, thank you.
We're okay.
In which case, do we have a motion?
I'll move staff's recommendation. Thank you, Mike and staff and everyone. So good work.
I'll second that.
All right, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Morel?
Yes.
Director Randall? Director Bender?
Yes.
Vice President Laliotis?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes. A lot of looking in all directions there.
And those are the numbers.
Those are the numbers. Those are the numbers. They were good numbers. And number 24 now, consideration of approval of resolution 2025-06, documenting the negative local impacts of federal funding cuts on forest health and wildfire mitigation.
This is the Debbie Downer.
This is the Debbie Downer. You're welcome.
All approved staff's recommendation.
Whoa, I think we have a motion on the table here, Brian.
We got to get public comment. I don't know. The forms must be observed.
Enough said.
Good evening again. Action item number 24 is a little bit of a breakaway from the norm for us here at the district in terms of an action item that staff would propose. And I want to kind of give preface this presentation with the fact that this is really in response and collaboration and partnership with a lot of other public entities in our region, both locally here in the Truckee-Tahoe Basin, regionally with counties, and across the state of California, and really across the western region. And so this is an opportunity for us to have an open discussion and deliberation with the board. It was recommended to staff by both members of the board and our partners out there in the community to consider this item for approval. And so I'm happy to go through this presentation. Feel free to stop me if you'd like anywhere in the process, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that I might be able to answer at the end of it. So this is the topic on the impacts of federal funding cuts that we've all heard about in recent news on our local forest health and wildfire mitigation efforts. So as you all know, you've seen it in our budgets, you've seen it in our staff reports and presentations. The district over the years has continued to ramp up and improve our efforts in wildfire mitigation and forest health. And that really comes in the form of us doing our own line clearing and vegetation management on our properties and our utility infrastructure. So, we've made significant financial investments as well as operational adjustments. And so I talk about things like the types of fuses, the non-expulsionary fuses, the one-shot or single-trip protocols we put our system in place, the reclosers, and the continued effort to get further and further towards or closer and closer to smart grid type systems where we can do some more real-time automated controls to protect our community. Some other contributing factors here, SB 901 requires that our agencies complete a wildfire mitigation plan. And so over the last several years, staff has brought to the board for consideration and approval adoption of a wildfire mitigation plan that includes all of our adjustments, our protocols, our procedures in this effort. We also have kind of enhanced and magnified the considerations we make in all aspects of our design, operation, and maintenance of our facilities with regard to wildfire risk. And so I just mentioned that, the fuses, the ground clearing, the line clearings, the procurement and installation of backup generators at our water facilities, the clearing of our lands, the construction styles that we use. So everything's kind of has at least some focus on the wildfire risk mitigation there. And then from an investment standpoint, our vegetation management budget has gone from probably closer to $250,000 back in 2008 to over $2 million today. This is really our attempt as an agency to continue to reduce the risk of overhead line interplay with tree branches and other wildfire risk, also ground clearing, land clearings around our facilities, and some of the infrastructure adjustments I mentioned. We also own several land holdings across the community. And it's important that not just our overhead infrastructure, but that the lands we own and operate and maintain, that we continue to create defensible spaces, fuels reductions on many, many acres across this community. We also recently have celebrated and been very proud of the efforts our staff have made in collaborating with not just public agencies, but private landowners that we're neighbors with with the Truckee Fire Protection District grant funds that we were awarded last summer. The district benefited, I think it's somewhere around $180,000 in actual grant funds for our property, but an overall $350,000 grant fund that was shared between the public and private partners there. This is in that Trout Creek area over up above Bridge Street. This is a repeat of that same page. My apologies. So another key component for us is emergency response planning and funding are also key for forest health and wildfire mitigation. Most recently, last year, the district participated jointly with our public partnerships and Nevada County on a local hazard mitigation plan, referred to as an LHMP. The district was included as an annex to that compliance plan, hazard mitigation plan, where we identified risk and projects that we need to implement and fund to mitigate those risk through the Nevada mitigation plan. It contains a list of projects that we're positioning ourselves for state and federal funding resources. These adjustments at the federal level have a direct impact on our ability to plan for those funds. Also want to point out, I'm making this presentation on behalf of Stephen Poncelet. He was been ill earlier this week and wants to make sure he gets through that process before he comes back in. But, we all know about the work that Stephen and his department, our Strategic Affairs Department, have done in building and maintaining strong relationships with both local, state, and federal representatives and our key agency partners. A lot of work. This district has historically invested and continues to invest a lot in building and maintaining those relationships because they're critical in our long-term strategies. So we work with a lot of joint action groups. You hear us reference those with acronyms. Mr. Poncelet is the king of acronyms, so I'm going to put some definitions here behind some of them. The American Public Power Association, APPA, Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems, UAMPS, you're all familiar with. CMUA, California Municipal Utilities Association, and NCPA, a very close partner of ours in Northern California Power Agency. Through those joint actions, we can either benefit and have kind of a voice in some of these federally funded grants and projects, or in some of the lobbying and advocacy that we can do at the local and state and federal level. So that case in point, staff plans to attend and there's also an opportunity if a board member desires later this spring to attend the NCPA Federal Policy Conference in DC. This is where General Manager Randy Howard of NCPA has been a strong and very significant voice as a local advocate for California in particular, but the Western region as a whole on federal impacts, the federal decision-making and policy-making, how it impacts wildfire mitigation and safety in the West, and particularly the cost that it's, the financial burden that public utilities have in California. And so Mr. Poncelet, myself, and some staff, our staff have been working with Congressman Kiley's office. We last year co-hosted with the town a local visit by Congressman Kiley's staff and himself. We also did a tour of our system so that they could see the actual work we've accomplished and then the work yet to be done in terms of wildfire mitigation in our system. This is a little bit redundant. I don't need to say this because I'm sure you're all aware of it and our community is aware of it. Recently, the federal government has made significant cuts to federal funding and staffing that will negatively impact local forest health and wildfire mitigation efforts. This has a broad-reaching impact, not just in our efforts and opportunities for funding, but our partnerships and our role in local wildfire mitigation is to avoid an additional ignition source and create some public safety there, but also our partners out there that do fuel management kind of beyond our reach with our overhead and infrastructure footprint. And so as Stephen pointed out here in his slide, one immediate impact is that they've paused the review of that local hazard mitigation plan by federal agencies, FEMA, and it delays the district's ability and our public agency partners' ability to successfully seek funding from federal hazard mitigation grant programs. So all of that's kind of on delay. And so some of the projects we've outlined in that may either have delayed funding or no funding at all based on some of these federal policymaking. So the federal cuts overall will impact our surrounding national forest and local agencies committed to forest health and wildfire mitigation work. These are numerous projects that rely on partnerships with the Tahoe National Forest or the U.S. Forest Service, our local counties, towns, and special districts, local fire protection districts, CAL FIRE. All of those have kind of interplay and interaction within our community. We have a lot of fire protection districts that work together, a lot of Forest Service agencies that work together, and then, as I mentioned, our local governmental agencies. Also, another potential impact here that we would see is that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, referred to as NOAA, the National Weather Service is under that umbrella. You might wonder how that would impact the PUD. Our partners, particularly in efforts to make kind of long-term and short-term strategies with preemptive power outage management or risk management, use NOAA to collect and analyze atmospheric data, climate data, and kind of long-term projections for both water and power strategies. But with NV Energy, PG&E to the west of us, and our partners north and south of us, NOAA becomes a critical component in giving us data so that we can make decisions on overhead power safety for our region. Absent NOAA, we would be left to some of our own kind of resources and analytics, our own weather station services and things like that. So, kind of one of the genesis, the catalyst behind this resolution that you have here tonight is that you may be aware that Town Council held a council meeting last night to evaluate and consider their own resolution. And I want to start with saying that this effort has been in large part, in significant part, spearheaded by Town Council, Council Member Henderson, and her team at the Town Council have really done a lot of outreach and efforts to have public agencies and public partners, not just in Truckee, not just in Nevada County, but across the Sierra Nevada, find public agencies to speak in a collective voice their concerns with some of the federal funding decisions that have been recently made and how it would directly impact our communities. And so the town adopted resolutions last night at their council meeting, one in opposition of federal cuts and the impacts it will have on local forest health and wildfire mitigation, and then a separate resolution that really addressed the overall broader economic impacts of our communities and the communities that neighbor us. So as I mentioned, they expressed an opposition to the federal cuts, and they're asking local agencies to adopt similar resolutions in a unified voice. The kind of immediate hope and plan would be that to compile these resolutions and physically deliver them to Congressman Kiley's office. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So, for the district, the most impactful federal cuts, the impact of the federal cuts are on local forest health and wildfire mitigation. Staff have prepared a resolution 2025-06 documenting the negative impacts of federal cuts to staffing and funding for our local forest health and wildfire mitigation, recommending this resolution be provided to our elected federal representatives, not just Congressman Kiley, but Senators Schiff and Padilla. Also, in addition to that resolution, the board authorizing staff to prepare a cover letter to be approved by the board president and vice president and delivered as a package to our representatives. There is no direct fiscal impact to the action item this evening. Obviously, the overarching impacts financially are significant to our community and region. There's just not a direct fiscal impact to this item. Staff's recommendation is to adopt Resolution 2025-06, documenting the negative local impacts of federal funding and staffing cuts on forest health and wildfire mitigation. And number two, direct staff to draft a cover letter to be approved by the board president and vice president, expressing the district's concern over federal staffing and funding cuts that will negatively impact local forest health and wildfire mitigation. I'll pause there to hand this back over to President Finn, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for that, Brian. Public comment, do we have any public comments on this item? Seeing none, bringing it here to the board for our response, our feelings, our thoughts, questions.
I just want to say this is a no-brainer. I mean, for the board, I think, well, maybe I should just speak for myself. This is a no-brainer and definitely behind any sort of collective action to see if we could make an impact and make a change.
Thank you, Director Morrell.
Ditto.
Okay. Thank you, Director Laliotis.
Yeah, I concur. It's a no-brainer for the community, not just this organization.
Thank you, Director Randall. Okay, and 2 thumbs up from Director Bender. Okay, well, thank you all. Clearly, we're all on the same page here, but these services are really important to our region. It undermines the efforts that we've been making in the past, I don't know. There's been a concerted effort in this region to really collaborate with each other to make it regional priority wildfire safety mitigation. It's just stunning to me that this moment is what it is. And I think it's really important for us to speak up and to advocate to ourselves, for ourselves, and to not just go along to get along. This is not the moment for that. This is the moment to absolutely document and make clear to our elected representatives how these cuts, again, affect our community. We are being put at risk needlessly, and that is unacceptable. We're supposed to be solving problems together. That's how I'm looking at these, our representatives we elect them to help us solve our problems. And we need them to do that. We need them to participate in this moment. And we may, as time goes on, need to be a little more uncomfortable and maybe take stronger stances in things that may not be directly in our purview. Tonight, what is in front of us is just wildfire safety and mitigation, and that's clearly in our, that's where we live, as part of our mission. But we may have to push ourselves harder as we move forward. So prepare yourselves. Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll move to the recommended motion number 1 and number 2 as presented.
Thank you. Director Morrell, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Very good, thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Morrell?
Yes.
Director Randall?
Yes,
Director Bender?
Yes.
Vice President Laliotis?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes. Thank you all. That's everybody in the room. Thank you all. And that brings us to the end of our action items and into our closed session items. So we have 3 items in closed session. Yes,
If I may,
you may.
I could help you shortcut that.
Please.
Suggest that you announce that we're going to go into closed sessions, closed session under items 25, 26, and 27 as listed on the agenda.
Very good. We are going to go into closed sessions on items 25, 26, and 27 as listed on the agenda.
And I just have one question. So are we bypassing director updates?
No, we did that in the very beginning.
Each director came up and presented?
Oh, no, they didn't.
I'm sorry,
The
staff director. I'm
staff
sorry.
director.
Not us.
No.
Brian took the helm on that one.
We, in the interest of time and efficiency, we decided to forego presentations. We referred to the staff reports. I gave just some brief updates, but next time staff will have individual presentations for each department.
So I just have one comment about that. I was really looking forward to the part of the month. So if that could come back into the presentation, I love it. And so I was going to make that comment. Looking for it. So anyway, I love that part. So it's educational for me and it's fun. So keeps board meetings fun.
Agreed. And I blew it too, because I blew right over it it was terrible. I'll work on that.
The part of the month was a sharpened pencil and calculator for the financial report.
Right on. Thank you all, and we'll see everybody in closed session.